This week on Connecticut Power and Politics, should Ganim go? Calls intensify for Bridgeport's mayor to resign after his hand-picked police chief is charged with fraud. Climate clash, Connecticut takes on ExxonMobil over climate change. And mailing it in, your questions about absentee ballots answered. This is Connecticut Power and Politics. Welcome to Power and Politics, our weekly deep dive into what's making news in Connecticut and who's making news. I'm John Craven.
The City Council has begun its process of reforming our police.
Frustration from Bridgeport City Council as the Park City is rocked by yet another political scandal. This time, now former Police Chief A.J. Perez indicted, along with the city personnel director, both accused of rigging the police exam to guarantee Perez the job, allegedly at the urging of Mayor Joe Ganim, who is not charged.
Mayor Ganim needs to resign immediately. If anyone believes that Chief Perez and David Dunn orchestrated this scheme independent of him, I have a Congress Street bridge I'd like to sell them.
7 years back in 2003. This time, Ganim insists his hands are clean.
Everybody wants to know the answer to one simple question. Did you at any point tell anybody to do anything that was improper?
No, absolutely not. I would never let anybody speak on my behalf, especially on something as important as this.
But according to the indictment, David Dunn, the hiring manager, stated that the mayor wanted Perez to be in the top 3. And one of the interview panelists understood Dunn to be asking him to score Perez higher and to influence other panelists to do the same. Dunn later denied any involvement from Ganim. All right, a lot to process here, and we have 2 experts to do it. Frank Recchia covers Bridgeport for us here at News 12 Connecticut, and Tara O'Neill covers Bridgeport Police for Hearst Connecticut Media. All right, Frank, I want to start with you because, again, you actually sat down with Mayor Joe Ganim right after this broke. Does he have any plans to step down?
Well, John, let me say right off the bat that I spoke with the mayor early Thursday morning, and he told me that he is absolutely adamant about asserting that he has no plans to step down. This is a mayor who tells News 12 Connecticut that he has spoken with the U.S. attorney, and this is new as of Thursday. He has spoken to the U.S. attorney, and he is confident that he is in no legal jeopardy. He's eager to get that message out now, and by saying that he's in no legal jeopardy, that really does go hand in hand with his assertion that he knew nothing about it, as you saw me ask him in his office over the weekend. Where we go from here, we're going to wait and see, but there is certainly this strident drumbeat that is growing. The tonality is hard to ignore, that we have a man who is being called upon to step down. But you know, the interesting thing about covering Joe Ganim is you have this very resilient force in politics. I think, John, in our earlier conversation, you said he's been referred to politically as the comeback kid. But the question now is, can you come back from this? And I think we'll address that in a moment.
Yeah, well, Tara, you've been covering this FBI probe since it all began. Let me get you in on this. Walk us through the timeline here.
Sure, so I won't drag you through absolutely everything, but back in March of 2016, the mayor appointed Armando Perez as acting chief of the police department when Joseph Gaudet retired. About 2 years later, March, I believe 20th, 2018, is when the mayor announced that the city was in early stages working toward finding a permanent replacement for the chief position. And again, in those 2 years, Perez was in the position serving as acting chief and continued throughout the chief search. A couple months, after they announced that the search had begun. In late October, I think it was October 23rd, 2018, the city announced the 3 finalists, which of course we know was Perez, Captain Roderick Porter, who oversees school resource and community services, and then Louis Casanova from New Haven Police. He was an assistant chief. I think he's now up in Hartford with the Capitol Police. But those were the 3 finalists that the city had, and by November 5th, 2018, the mayor announced his choice, and that was Armando Perez, and he got a 5-year contract to stay in as chief. And, you know, as we all know, just last week, September 10th, is when Perez and David Dunn got arrested and formally charged on a federal complaint.
And Tara, this whole probe has cost taxpayers a lot of money. The Connecticut Post in June reported that the city had already spent $500,000 on this FBI investigation. That included hiring private attorneys for the mayor, his chief of staff, Chief Perez, and David Dunn, the city personnel director, who of course we now know is under indictment. You know, those legal bills are really going to start adding up now. Are taxpayers still on the hook for all this, Tara?
So from what we've been told, no. A colleague of mine spoke with John Bohannon, who is the deputy city attorney for Bridgeport. He made it very clear that, I believe his quote was that Perez and Dunn were on their own, that the city is no longer paying for attorneys for them. In terms of attorneys for the mayor and his chief of staff, Bohannon also said that those attorneys are no longer needed. So what we still don't know, though, is in terms of these attorneys, how much was spent overall throughout the time that they were needed.
Yeah, a lot of questions remaining there. Frank, let me bring you in on this. A new acting chief has taken over, Rebecca Garcia. She's a veteran over at Bridgeport Police. But some are now calling for her to step aside too, right?
That's right, John. You know, it's a very complex situation because you have the city charter, which is this essential document that the local government is based upon. It's basically our constitution. And, you know, you go back, this is something that was established in the Middle Ages during the feudal system to run local provinces. And what it's evolved into now is this really the heartbeat of our city. And everybody should read this document closely, make it your reading at night before you go to bed, because it's all about this charter. And that's what Chris Caruso, former state representative, and Maria Pereira on the city council, and Anita Martinez in the city council, they were all coming back to this point. They said, you know, it's not about Rebecca Garcia. They said it's about the city charter and following the law. And what they say, their assertion in no uncertain terms, is that the mayor violated the city charter, broke the law, they say, by making this choice and not another, not choosing from, as Tara was talking about, that list of pre-selected candidates who've gone through the vetting process. You know, but the question now becomes, so, you know, you have these two camps, John. You've got on one side the city council president, on the other side you have Maria Pereira, and people are saying, well, yeah, if we use that list, the list is corrupted, because they're saying there was this process where the police chief was not doing the right things. They say that list is corrupted and should not be used. But then others say, well, we spent all this money, we did all the research, the investigations, we absolutely should choose from that list. But yes, that is the topic right now, what's going to happen. And when I spoke to the mayor Thursday morning, he said, look, guys, I'm open-minded. And this has not been reported yet. He said, look, I'm open-minded about this. We had an emergency situation where there was this vacuum. He needed to fill it with somebody quickly. And he said he thought he did the right thing by picking, according to the city attorney, a person that is perfectly appropriate to select. Because when you read their response to what Maria Pereira and Anita Martinez and Chris Caruso were saying, the response is very simple. They said, no, you're wrong. And they selected their own passage from the city charter, and they said, look, we absolutely can do this. So it's going to come down to somebody who knows a lot more about city charters and municipal law. Constitutional law, I think, is the branch of law that deals with this particular kind of detail. So we're going to have to see where the mayor actually stands in legality. And remember, State Representative Chris Caruso promised that if the mayor does not comply, that he would face a legal challenge. So we'll have to see what happens, John.
All right, Frank Recchia from News 12 Connecticut and Tara O'Neill from Hearst Connecticut Media, we thank you for joining us today. All right, stick around. Next, should big oil pay Connecticut's big bill for climate change? We'll be right back.
An up-close look.
Welcome back to Power in Politics. I'm John Craven. From the wildfires in the West to tropical storms and tornadoes here at home, climate change is costing lives and money. This week, Connecticut took drastic action against ExxonMobil, the world's biggest oil company.
This morning, I sued ExxonMobil for lying to Connecticut and to the American people.
Connecticut's Attorney General wants the world's largest oil company to pay up.
They knew as far back as the 1950s that the planet was warming.
The lawsuit says in 1978, Exxon began researching global warming. By 1982, company scientists concluded significant changes in the Earth's climate were possible, but not certain. 6 years later, an internal memo laid out a strategy emphasizing that uncertainty to resist sensationalization, which could lead to non-fossil fuel resources. Exxon says the statements are cherry-picked from a small number of employees and taken out of context.
ExxonMobil knew, and it's wonderful that they're going to be held accountable.
Meantime, here in New Haven, they're spending $200 million on flood protection.
We're spending it on infrastructure to prepare for something that we could have avoided.
Connecticut is not alone. More than a dozen states and cities are already suing the oil industry, although a judge threw out New York's lawsuit. Why get involved in that then, if other states are already carrying the torch?
This is an existential crisis to Connecticut. I'm not going to wait for somebody in another state to take action to protect us. This is my job.
Well, this isn't Attorney General William Tong's first fight with a major industry. He's also taken on the generic drug makers and, frequently, the Trump administration. But Tong told me this battle is personal. It's a beautiful day on the New Haven waterfront. Why choose this spot to make this announcement?
I think this spot really accentuates why this is so important and how much is at risk because of ExxonMobil's misconduct, that they lied to us for so long, engaged in this campaign of deception to convince us that climate change is not real and that we shouldn't make the investments that we need to make.
And you think Exxon should pay?
We think Exxon should pay to confront the climate crisis, to help us reverse the climate crisis and climate change. They should pay for all the investments and costs that we've incurred because they lied to us. And they should show us all the climate science they have. They've got tons of climate science that we need to see.
What did Exxon know, and when did they know it?
They knew as far back as the 1950s that the planet was warming. They knew about the greenhouse effect and greenhouse gases. They knew about sea level rise. And they talked openly about this science. And so for a long time, ExxonMobil was pretty open about it. And their scientists were publishing their findings. They were speaking about it at conferences. They were writing internal memos. But at some point, they decided, you know what? This is going to hurt our ability to sell gasoline. And so they decided in the late 80s, we're going to go in a different direction. We're going to cover it up. And so they began a long, decades-long effort to lie to the American people.
Now, one of the things these documents say also, though, is that at the time, there wasn't a scientific consensus.
Well, that's their point of view. That's the washing of the science now. You know, that they tried to create doubt, and that was part of their strategy. And so they were developing the science. The science was pointing in the direction very strongly of climate change and a warming planet. And instead of pursuing it further, they chose to conceal it.
So why just go after ExxonMobil, though? Texaco was around back then. A lot of big oil companies probably knew this information.
So ExxonMobil is the biggest market leader. They have the most information that we can glean. And it's a very simple case against a very simple defendant, or a very simple case against a single defendant. And we think the best way to get to a verdict and to trial, and the best way to get the most for the people of our state and this country is to go right after the biggest actor in the space, and that's ExxonMobil.
Connecticut certainly isn't the only state to sue the fossil fuel companies.
Correct.
Why get involved in that then, if other states are already carrying the torch?
Oh, well, that's easy, because this has a direct and immediate impact on the people of our state, and we are suffering the punishing effects of climate change every day, and I have a duty to protect and defend the people of our state.
The West is burning right now. We've seen the horrifying images out of Oregon and California. This is happening now.
This is happening now. But you don't have to look to the West. Just look to what happened during Isaias. Look at what happened during the aftershocks of Hurricane Laura. When I was a kid, Hurricane Gloria was a once-in-a-century event. And people thought, holy smokes, we're going to have a hurricane in Connecticut. And it was something unlike anything we had ever experienced. And that was a really big deal. Now it happens with alarming frequency.
If the goal is to get us to a better climate, couldn't you argue that the energy companies, as large as they are, as many researchers they have, they're really the best position to get us there? And if we sue them into extinction, we might be setting ourselves back?
Well, first of all, no one thinks for a second that ExxonMobil is going extinct at any time soon. They are the biggest and most well-resourced of multinational corporations. ExxonMobil has all the resources in the world and all the strength in the world, and I don't worry about them for a second. Yes, I do believe the energy companies should lead. I do believe that ExxonMobil should lead. They're not. I'm suing to force them to exercise that leadership and to lead the way and to pay for and make for all the investments that we need to confront climate change. You're absolutely right. We need them to step up. And if they won't do it voluntarily, I'm going to make them do it.
When you look out on this beautiful waterfront, you think 20, 30 years from now, what's your biggest fear about what it's going to look like where we're sitting?
My biggest fear is that 20, 30, 50, 100 years from now, my kids won't be able to sit here. That there'll be water, 20 inches, 36 inches or more higher than where we are now. I mean, right here's the Q Bridge. Imagine if all of this area were underwater, consistently battered by extreme weather, which it already is. That's what I'm concerned about.
A spokesperson for ExxonMobil says legal proceedings like this waste millions of dollars of taxpayer money and do nothing to advance meaningful actions that reduce the risk of climate change. All right, stick around. Next, confused about voting by mail? We'll sort it out for you.
Download the News 12 app on Apple TV.
Welcome back to Power and Politics. I'm John Craven. Watch your mailbox. Soon you'll receive an application to request an absentee ballot. On Monday, News 12 Connecticut's Karen Pinto looked into how it all works.
You may have seen this ballot drop box in your town, especially near a town clerk's office. And if you plan to vote by mail and you don't want to wait for the mail carrier, one option is to drop off your ballot right in this box, which the town clerk checks every day. It's 50 days until Election Day.
Well, let me put it to you this way. Nobody's taking any vacation soon. Anytime soon in this office.
Lucy Carilli, the Republican registrar, and Ron Malloy, the Democratic registrar in Stamford, may not agree on everything.
I expect about 35 to 42,000 absentee ballots.
I don't think so.
For the presidential
We disagree on this.
But they work well together to ensure the voting process is smooth for all their voters.
If you have any question, don't assume. Don't ask your neighbor. Ask us.
The Secretary of State sent out an application for absentee balloting to all registered voters in Connecticut. If you plan to vote by mail, send that application back to your town clerk. Malloy says ballots will be sent out by October 2nd and encourages you to send that back as soon as you can.
The safest 100% way to vote for your health is by absentee ballots.
Carilli says in-person voting is also safe and says cleanliness precautions are of the utmost importance when it comes to in-person voting at the 23 polling locations in Stamford.
We clean the polls before they go in and after they go out.
The registrar's office counts the votes and have until the following Monday to give that information to the state.
This is, it's a great, big, major undertaking. There's no question about that.
That was Karen Pinto reporting. And remember, there is no early voting in person in Connecticut, at least not yet. All right, that's all our time for this week. We want to hear from you. Email us or comment at news12.com or our social media platforms. And of course, you can catch Power in Politics every Saturday and Sunday at the times on your screen. That's all our time this week. I'm John Craven. Thanks for watching and have a great week.
News 12 Time and Temperature is brought to you by attorney Tom Gannum. Injured? Keep calm and call Tom. Attorney Tom Gannum.